Deepti Aggarwal. I'm a high schooler at Troy High School in Troy, Michigan. Today's guest is Dr. Kalamangalam, and he is the Division Chief of Epilepsy at the University of Florida College of Medicine. His career has been devoted to the care of patients with epilepsy and research in brain science around epilepsy. He's widely published, and his research has been funded by the National Institutes of Health, the American Epilepsy Society, and others. So, Dr. Kalamangalam, what originally drew you to studying epilepsy?
Well, I would say early on, when I was training, I decided to do neurology. So that decision came fairly early after I began to be a junior doctor, after I qualified and actually began to work. And this was in the UK where I was training at that time. And we know within neurology, it was obvious quite soon that it was a very vast field, and there were various aspects to it. And I have to say, I particularly liked a neurologist that I worked for, who was really quite eccentric and very funny and a very intelligent man, and often misunderstood by other people, I think, who actually inspired me because I just observed the way he worked. And he was interested in epilepsy. And so that was a little bit, but I have to say the main thing was really was my own interest in the field that I felt taught us a lot about how the brain works, in a sense that, and in a way that I'm personally interested in sort of an approach to brain function that I'm personally interested in. But also the patients were, I found that interesting, the patient interaction interesting. I found the mix of inpatient and outpatient work interesting. I found the fact that it has big overlap with surgical treatments interesting. In a scientific way, I found what you call the phenomenology of epilepsy actually very interesting indeed. So actually everything just seemed perfect, I have to say, and not too many things in life end up that way, but this one did.
What principles and ethics do you live by, and how does this play into the way you conduct your research?
Well, my principles is to have a cup of coffee every morning. Okay, so I live by that. No, so it's a very lofty question. Okay, and I have to say I did look at your questions, but it's not as though I really studied them and practiced what I was going to say. Basically, but if you now ask me, I have to tell you what I feel instinctively, which is, I guess the principles you live by is, there are a few, which is, you do your utmost to actually do the right thing. Okay, and you do your utmost to understand things as well as you can. I think we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to everybody around us, and we owe it to our patients. And we can't really do a good job unless, I think you're devoted to those. That's my view. So if I had a principle that principles I live by, I guess that's it. I would like to understand things in the best possible way, as deeply as possible. And I would like to do the right thing. And not that you're always successful, of course you're not. And you say, does this play into the way you conduct your research? Absolutely. It plays into everything, how you live your life, and how you treat your patients, and how you treat your colleagues or your seniors or your juniors or whatever it happens to be. So you've got to try to get to the bottom of things, or try to understand things at a basic level. I think that really helps in making your work solid as much as possible. Obviously, we also make mistakes. You've got to learn from your mistakes. But that's all really. I think it's an approach that where you try to get to your best understanding of what's going on, and the best action that you can then perform given that understanding. I think that's fairly accurate, actually. I think.
In recent science history, who or what would you say was the most important scientific discovery?
That's an enormous question. Okay, and that's a question that would be asked of a pure scientist, which I'm not. So I guess I really couldn't talk about science in the way that you've posed that question. It's just too big and vast for me to say anything intelligible. Okay, all I can say is I guess maybe I'll answer it in two parts. Okay. One is I'll just answer it with respect to the world of the brain science around epilepsy. Okay, which is a much more focused answer, and that would be really the fact that you can see, and that there are many ways in which you can see the same thing. And I think that it's not a single discovery, but it's really an approach that all of science has recognized now for a long time, which is that there's no one right answer, believe it or not. Okay, and it depends on what question you ask and at what level that you ask that question. So in the world of epilepsy, you could ask, a scientific discovery or whatever could be, well, here's a medicine and this has been found to be the right medicine for this particular patient. And we know that because of patients who've been studied like this and so on. So that's one kind of level. On the other hand, you could talk about a different kind of level altogether, where you could talk about what's actually happening in this person's brain when they have a seizure, or what happens when you scan this patient with an MRI scan, and can we see something in there that, that will tell us about his disease. So these are all various different things, but they all pertain to the same person, right? So I think an important part of what's happening, and in recent decades, at least in the field I work in, is the value of many different approaches at many different levels. And it goes by many names. And, some people call it multimodality, some people call it whatever, data fusion, whatever, okay, you want to call it. There are many different approaches, okay, and they're all kind of valid. And they also obviously relate to each other. And so I think that, that it's an important thing that we've all discovered in our field. Like in our field, for instance, there are two ways of looking at someone's brain with seizures. You can either take a picture of it, okay, you can do an image, or you can actually study the electricity that comes from it. Now, those are two very different things, okay, but they're both valid and extremely important. And so which is the truth? There is no one truth. They do, of course, talk to each other, those two things, but we don't often understand what the relationship is. But they're both equally valid. Okay, so I think that the sense that you can think of things in more than one way is very important. And that goes back to, if you like, an entire way of thinking about science in general. And I'm now enlarging the discussion a little bit, and wandering a little bit beyond my own immediate experience, which is, the importance of seeing things in different ways or representing things in different ways. Okay, so for instance, I think you go to high school, you probably know about the number system. And okay, so we have, for instance, the Hindu Arabic number system. Okay, you have a digit place and you have decimals and so on. Okay, and you have digits from 1 to 9, and then after 9, the digits, you don't have a digit for 10, but you have 2 digits, 1 and 0. So that's our system. Okay, that's base 10. That's not the only way you can represent a number. Okay, so the number 8 can be represented by a single numeral 8, or it can be represented, say, for instance, in binary. Okay, so that is a different representation. That's a representation of ones and zeros. Okay, now that the number 8 remains the same, the concept is the same, but the representation is different, and it's just as valid, and it's really particularly good if you are, thinking about digital communication. Then you do it through ones and zeros. So I've kind of wandered out from epilepsy to give you an example, okay, of the importance of different types of thought in scientific discovery. I guess, I think that to me is really big. The other little thing that I was going to say about scientific discovery is, the validity, if you like, of the scientific method itself. So, long ago, people thought you couldn't actually synthesize elements. You couldn't synthesize what are called organic molecules outside the body. Okay, so as like 200 years ago, people didn't think that whatever is inside our body could actually be made in a test tube. The whole field of organic chemistry was overturned, that whole thing, that said that no, actually you can create things that actually are biological entities, biological molecules, and you can make them in a test tube. So what's inside us is actually can be synthesized, can be understood, right? So I think that is a very important process, the process that actually you can, the process of science, extends to everything indeed. And there's a method. And and there are ways of making progress. With regard to very complex and abstract things. And so, especially with regard to the brain, you can imagine a lot of people would have many opinions about whether we can understand the brain or not, and so on. And I think one of the things we've learned is that you can do, okay, but it's important also to keep an open mind and know that maybe you can't explain everything right now at this moment. So this whole idea of trying to being logical and rational, and yet having a mind that's not closed and that doesn't think that all the answers are here, and that we know everything and all of that. So I mean, that sort of balance is also, I think, a very important part of the scientific process. So I've given you a very long answer, okay? But but I would say, and I'm not giving you a particular discovery or anything like that, but I'm just telling you what I suppose it's a more personal answer about what I feel are important thought processes in science. Okay, I'll stop now.
On a related note, who is someone in the scientific community that you look up to?
It's very hard for me to pick out a single person, and I'm not going to, okay? It's just impossible. Yeah, it's like saying who's the world's best guitar player, so I don't know. It depends on whose music you like and whatever, right? So you don't, I mean, I can't say there's a single person, but I'll give you a very general answer again. And I think the most impressive people are those who do a lot with very little. And in today's age, we have a lot of facilities, a lot of equipment, technology that helps us. If you go back, 30, 40 years or 100 years or whatever, people did a lot, I feel, with very, very little. And there are people who wrote whole textbooks without the aid of a word processor or Microsoft Word, cut and paste and all of that. So they wrote in longhand. And there are people who've written volumes and volumes of books who've made observations. Okay, the people who started our field, didn't have anything before them they created it. So I feel the people who kind of started things off are those I really look up to the most, because there wasn't anything that existed before them, and they had very little. They often built their own equipment. I mean, they did everything, okay? And at least that's the history that we read. And those are the people I really look up to. So I like the historical figures a lot. And, and I think we are very fortunate in the modern world. But to me, I mean, the people who came before us, like long ago, to me are very inspiring. So, okay.
So what was your school life like, and when did you know you wanted to be like a researcher and a scientist?
My school life was full of homework. No, it wasn't. No, school life was fine. School life was a lot of fun. I went to school in India, where I grew up, and it's very different from the Western Hemisphere, the USA. So I think we had a wonderful bunch of. I had a wonderful bunch of peers, some of whom I'm still in touch with. I think we had some very dedicated teachers. It was a very simple life, very simple indeed, in comparison to the lives that you have, I'm sure, or my daughters have. Okay, they're in high school, one's in college. So it's quite different. But I have to say, it was really quite innocent. It was very simple. There wasn't that much we had, not many possessions. But we learned a few things very well. I think that simplicity taught us, I don't know, a kind of fondness for the basic principles and the fundamentals. And, I think of it as very simple and true, actually, in retrospect. That's what school was like. And obviously, even though we didn't have that much, in terms of possessions and things to do and so on, we still had a lot of fun. We made some great friends. When did I know I wanted to be a scientist or do something in science? I've never thought of anything apart from doing something in the sciences, actually, ever since I was in high school. And it was just a question of in which direction I would go. So I wanted to be a physicist for the longest period of time. And then at some later time, I wanted to be a mathematician. I ended up becoming a physician. Okay. And today I do kind of a little bit of everything, in the science that I do. Um, I'm fortunate that I do things that I like to do and in the way that I do them. So I think I always wanted to know that. I mean, there have been times in life at a later stage where I've had difficulties and I've questioned it and I wanted to run away from it um, because I wasn't being successful or I had, there were problems. So it's not been completely easy or straightforward. But in terms of that's what really interests me and so on. I really haven't had much doubt about that since I was in school. Okay, it's a different thing when you want to make it a career and you want to be successful. Obviously, you want to earn enough money to keep yourself alive, and and all of that. And so there are all sorts of other issues that come in at a later time. But it's never been. I've never doubted it that much, and it came very naturally to me, I have to say. And of course, I had a couple of really good teachers who probably didn't know that they were being inspiring, but they were. And so you kind of want to become like them a little bit, or you want to know what they know, and so you end up going in that direction. I also had a very influential person in my life, an uncle of mine who was a very eminent scientist in India, and I wanted to be like him. And so you have your role models, but of course, at the end of the day, you need to have an intrinsic interest. And so there's some people are just drawn to it, and other people aren't. And that's all there is to it.
What is the biggest risk you've ever taken?
I'm not going to give you a straight answer to almost any question, okay? So, because when you say biggest and so on, it's like you're trying to wait and so on. And I don't have an honest answer to that, except that obviously we take risks all the time. And I would say the risks, and this is probably true of everyone who does, perhaps all professionals, who knows. The biggest risks have been those that have involved changes of jobs, because you take another opportunity, and so you're leaving something behind that and you're familiar with and so on. And unless it's a natural progression, if you take another opportunity as a positive choice, then that's a big risk, because you might be leaving something that is very secure and very comfortable for the unknown. Okay, so that is a big risk, and we take that. I mean, that is virtually everybody is faced with those decisions, in your professional life and in academic medicine, certainly. So those risks I have taken, and fortunately, they've all turned out to be okay so far. Okay, so but it's always an unknown when you jump in or you begin to take up something that really, and you leave something behind. It's a big risk, and you have to have faith and confidence that, in fact, and make it work for you, even if in the beginning there are difficulties. You have to make it work, and so yeah. I guess those are the biggest risks.
And finally, what excites you the most about what you do, your job?
Well, I like almost everything about it. I wouldn't say I like every 100%. No, there's a lot of, like in every part, aspect of life, there are issues that, you wish didn't exist and that didn't come your way and so on. But I have to say, I like many things, and I like the patient interaction. I like my daily schedule very much, actually. I like the life of an academic very much indeed. I like being in a university. I just love it. Okay, so I like the field that I work in. I like the fact that I have stuff to learn and do, right? And I like when patients get better. That's really nice too. And I like interacting with my colleagues. I mean, I like discussing things. I like conferences. I like almost everything about it, I have to say. So yeah, not 100%, but almost everything. So I enjoy coming into work every day, and I enjoy my Monday as much as I enjoy my weekend. I look forward to the weekend, and I look forward to Monday. So I look forward to both. So let me just say that so that good that we talked about this, because I just like to acknowledge my co-authors. Okay, coming back to that paper. Obviously, we don't do things, very hard to do things completely alone. And I've been fortunate to have recently some excellent people to work with. So I'd like to acknowledge my colleague and friend, Mircea Celaru, who did the coding and for that paper, and then also acknowledge the assistance of a graduate student here at UF called Sarah Long, who created those beautiful pictures that everyone likes to see about the rotating brains. Okay, so, all right.